So ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for the one, the only Monica, who is going to find that mute button, and off she goes. Beautiful. Thank you, Monica.
Okay, thank you very much. And all of you guys, thank you so much for your patience in our presentation. God bless. We had a way to start showing our work. I will just go straight and I will use as an inspiration the intro that was ideally was in reverse, but I think this is just fantastic. This is a good intro about our trade. We're a socioeconomic development firm, and I will just try again with another video, and I really hope this one helps us. Okay, the story starts here, and this is when we start creating value in the industry. And I love this because it is raw as it is. This is geologists walking a blank canvas that happens to be mountains, deserts, and amazing and unique places in the world looking for mineral deposits. And it is a story working with in greenfield projects, and it started from day zero. It's quite an inspiration because as it is a blank canvas for a masterpiece of could be a master disaster. So when we are not aware of what we have underground and above ground. And that's when the story starts. And it is interesting when you start building the stories like this. Ideally, we would love to start from here and build a relationship from the beginning. But so many times we jump in a different moment of the mind cycle, but it still is always a blank canvas when we talk about relationships with people. And I will take you to what is the mineral capital. And I will start telling you about these stories, and I will connect these stories with the story of Chip Ruben. This picture is what we want to see in the industry. We want to see this is sampling in indigenous territories with indigenous peoples in a transparent process. And the gentleman with the pink shirt and a white cap, he's a geologist doing training on the job. So what we master here is that mineral capital can happen at the same time that human and social capital are happening, and at the same time that we are acknowledging or respecting indigenous rights, and at the same time that transparency and anti-corruption happens. So I know it's a picture that some of you might be familiar, some other probably not, but I treasure this picture because we have indigenous peoples in a very transparent way working and learning. And the mystery of mining, when they came home and said, oh, people just collect things. What is this whole thing that anti-mining groups are telling us? But this is when they are trying to go. But when social science and social scientists like us, we mine different. So we go to the same jungle and the same area, and where we encounter are jewels in every single person. And the dreams and the aspirations and the motivation to better future happens in all of these people. And that's where we also mine. And we mine in areas that are beautiful and nature as virgin as a forest could be, but also the limitations and challenges we have. So I will just move to what does it mean? And when we created the 360-degree rapid assessment, what does it mean really? And taking in consideration all of this. And also taking in consideration that mineral deposits around the world, as you can see in this map, they are right now, we are going for areas in a very remote locations in a developing world. And that translates to start being aware of a bigger scale. So mining is one of the very few industries that touches the core of humanity and the challenges of humanity at the same time that we go underground and touch that. So by 2050, this is nothing new for people. We know that we are going to grow up to 9.8 billion people. But what is interesting here is that 32% of the population is projected to live in rural and remote areas. So we're talking about years ahead of us in which remoteness still is a challenge. And in terms of challenges of communication, access to satisfying basic needs like sanitation, education, and so on. So we still have a big road to do that. And mining goes to these areas. So in a sense, as an industry, we need to be aware that 32% of the people that we're going to be dealing with in some point are living in conditions that are complicated. And the other part that is becoming quite of a challenge is highlighted in terms of conflict, is that the increasing conflicts that are happening around the world, some cases are the result of climate change. In some cases are a result of governments. In some cases are a result of the impossibility of them to make their living in the regions. We're just jumping to 1 billion, which is a huge number. And that will be something that the industry, we are going to see. When I was looking at how the world is evolving, it was interesting. I found this, and I love this graph because it shows that how much we are moving from non-democratic systems to democratic systems. And what does it translate to that? It translates that people have the right and the voice to express their concerns and discontents. So it's no longer a quiet world in which people don't do it. And I didn't include it here, but when you see the numbers in terms of social media materializes the rights. So we see that we were from 2.5 billion people back then, and now we're just basically talking that people in democracy were 800 million people back in 1951, and now we are 4.1 billion people living in democratic systems. So that means 4.1 billion people can have a voice and can express their content and discontent. Obviously, population has grown, and I mean, and you guys in math will start saying, Monica, but 50 years is a lot of people. Yes, but it's still the number. We're talking about almost 30% of people back then had a voice, and now we have almost 50. So it's like it is increasing, and it means that the industry will be questioned because we go to areas in conflict, we go to fragile in dealing with jurisdictions as complex as fragile states in some regions in the world, and we have an increased population that the demands and the conditions that they want to impose on the private sector are going to be greater. And this is something that we really need to look when we are working around social management. And the purpose is basically that we want to build a conflict-free environment. And that is, I never thought that in my work in trade, when I was talking about social development and the industry, I should put first in my priority work how to build a conflict-free environment, how we can open a space for collaboration in which they don't bring guns, we can use teasers. Together we can build airstrips. This is the story behind the picture. The community working with us in building an airstrip to have access to a remote area. This is their land, how you can give me permission to do it, how we can build it together, and how we transport and make things happen. And we can do it. Yes, we can do it. And that is one of the calls for the industry. And we really need to start thinking around that. There are many elements that are going to put pressure in the industry. And with Sarah, we agree that sometime soon we're going to bring another element, which is the green energy. And Andrew was just highlighting that it is a pressure. It's going to become something bigger. But right now, I'm just going to be talking around what is that. The supply chains, it's a call for conflict-free minerals. So now we have to build conflict-free environments for conflict-free minerals if we want to produce one. I'm not going to go deep on this because it is the pressure of the supply chains. And we're going to see also the pressure from shareholders and stakeholders. So it is coming as very strong forces all around that secure that mining is happening in conflict-free environments, or can we create them? Some scenarios, yes, we can, and others we have to accept. So I don't trade in this year of renaissance, as I call it, when you just go, or time out if you have a child, you go and you just quiet, think about it. So we were thinking about those many tools that are there. So many frameworks and all of these trying just to put the industry in a very rigid frameworks that allows us to tell the story. And I think that's the purpose of this, which is valid from a very different perspective. The Gold Council is doing it. ICMM is doing it. The stock markets are becoming much more stringent about that. But not many times we really get the story from the grassroots. And that is one of the pieces that worries me a lot, is that the risk lives in the grassroots. The challenges live in the grassroots, and the industry belongs to the grassroots. So we probably are separating the risk from the grassroots to the risks that are happening in the stock markets. Well, I will try to say Bay Street in Toronto, but well, everybody's working from home now. So from the risks that they separated from the grassroots. So we have to go back to that, raising those flags and understanding what is that. So in that, our purpose of the trade to do this was validating social risk that could be managed with sustainable solutions that we have, and the head office and that, let's say, more educated environment in different disciplines like finance and law and permit and in the process of permits and so on. But we thought that it was critical that in the industry and the effort to go and fit in frameworks like GRI or SASB, we also need to be aware that our industry has a very different set of issues that are not necessarily listed in those. But it's not, doesn't mean that we ignore the effort that has been made. So because that big effort is the story that we need to tell. Not many, and I will just highlight it here, what we created is the 360 degree. And we call it 360 degree because we were inspiring the wheel of color, because one connects to the other one, and mining is that beauty. Mining has that beauty that one connects to the other. Environmental is so grassrooted that belongs to the community concern or a community appreciation, but that only happens when governance pieces are there. So the wheel of colors connect all of them, and that's what we wanted. And we curated the rapid assembly, we curated for the industry, because the stories around land access in protected areas are not necessarily mentioned in GRI or SASB or the census framework, and it's a huge effort. Like if I just try to bring one of my pictures where the indigenous peoples are sampling with the geologists transferring knowledge in indigenous territories, it doesn't have room in GRI. And it tells that it's the best practice we could do. So the idea here is not create another one. The idea here is that we raise flags in saying, hey, in our industry, we're doing things as amazing as land access in protected or ancestral land, or we have artisanal mining as a big issue, and this is what we are doing about it. So raising those flags of social issues that are connected to environment and governance, and in a very quick way, because the idea of the rapid assessment is to raise flags and bring our 20 years of mosquito bites experience in dealing with communities and working with geologists when these guys are looking for something. Well, we are lucky because we just meet with communities and mamas and papas and sit down and hear the stories where the other guys are literally carrying little rocks and samples that I cannot understand, and I appreciate, but I don't understand. And we do to exploration. But those red flags that we want to highlight it here are issues that, from our experience, are critical for the risk in the industry. Community relations, indigenous relations is critical. And I separate it because it's very different to deal with traditional communities and community relations than with indigenous peoples. It's a very different thing. Also, the transparency is there, and labor rights is very different. Then when you deal with agriculture, you might find slave labor, child labor, and so many other issues that are critical. In a formal mining practice, we won't have those issues, but labor rights and health and safety are very close together due to the nature and the risk. The inclusion of women. I think that is amazing. I mean, I'm a lady who has been welcome in the industry, and I have never did before any advertisement as a lady. Well, probably my lipstick delays me a lot, but the inclusion of women, we also have to be aware that our industry is difficult. As an industry, as a process, is difficult for a mama who is an engineer working in the mill to bring the baby. I mean, it's just that they don't go together. So, and having daycare in these cases is just different. If you're in community relations, you bring the baby, everybody likes the baby, you are okay. That was my case. But when you are in the technical component, or if you are working underground, bringing the baby, it's just impossible. Strollers and trucks in underground, they don't go together. So those elements that I really believe that when we do the analysis of the industry, and that's why it's the 360 degree, we are trying to fit into global standards when we don't wear that size of shoes. We need to tell our story with our issues, with the challenges that we have, and how amazingly we have done it, and how much better we can do it tomorrow. So that's basically what we created, and yes, we give credit to these standards. I don't want to be any rebel here and say no, this is amazing. I think this is good, and even financiers understand that, which creates a common language. But we also have to work around what is our 360 degree. And this is great, but guess what? In my industry, we are doing also this. That is not listed here, and is also important part of the story to appreciate and why to invest. And with this is all the story. Oops, done. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you so much.
Amazing. Gracias, Monica. That was
Ah,
absolutely fantastic. So, ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for the wonderful Monica Ospina. That was absolutely brilliant. And
Thank
I'm
you.
so glad we managed to get through the technical mailstrom.
I'm sorry. I mean, seriously sorry. Well, probably makes us more human and proving Fabiano and I that we really belong to the field. So
no, it was
thank you so
fabulous,
much.
Monica. And so I think just before we go on to Maria with the next talk, so one just very quick question, and it came in from John, and he asks, do you have any hints on how to communicate complex aspects such as tailings design or acid mine drainage, etc., to Indigenous people, etc.? Have you got any hints on how do you overcome those communication barriers?
Well, I would love to pick Fabian's brain on this too, because we have been working a lot on bringing complex issues. Number one, kind of a wake-up call to people when we're dealing with Indigenous peoples. Indigenous peoples in remote areas, and I will be very specific about in remote areas, guess what? They're no monkeys. They're very smart. And they understand risk more than anybody in this world. They live in a risk environment. They send their kids to school when the kids have to cross rivers and walking for 3 hours with panthers and snakes and that, and they want the kid back. And they don't, so we ignore, and sometimes we just put them down, and that's very frustrating for them and for us. Probably you won't bring the high level sophisticated use of language, but the use of language here is what demonstrates how professional you are. We can go in the use of language to the minimum level in terms of simplicity, while the industry, we are expecting people with no education to go to the highest level of complexity. And I think that is a gap that we cannot afford. If we were educated to that, we can make this simple statement, take into consideration that they understand risk, that if we want to treat them equal doesn't mean that they cannot understand, means that it's my duty to explain to you. And it doesn't mean that you use cartoons. Please don't use cartoons. I don't know why, and I have seen it. We saw it with Fabiano, one project in Colombia, that they were explaining to communities what is communities with cartoons like Coca-Cola. And guess what? It was a disaster, because they are not cartoons. They are human beings. They have long hair, a little chubby, a little skinny, tall, short. They're human beings. So if we treat people like patronizing like that, or we really want to show ourselves how smart we are with big words, put yourself in the mirror and talk to yourself. But when you're talking to communities, that the challenge and they have in life is that they didn't access education like we, because they are remote, not because they are more or less than us. It's because it's difficult. You cannot work. I mean, just imagine how many hours is walking from the jungle to Harvard. I mean, it's complicated. So we have that duty to make it simple, and that is fantastic. Fab has more experience than me because he's drinking those drinks and talking to them. Fab.
So I think actually with that, Fab, I think we might come to you in the panel session at the end, if that's okay with you, because I just really want to go straight into Maria Arpa, because I think, Maria, some of what Monica's just been saying probably resonates very clearly with yourself. But